Awesome. Hello, everyone. Revenue Riders podcast coming at you. Drew Noel, VP Revenue at SES Cloud. Jason Salzman, Director of Growth at Live Data Technologies, and our wonderful guest and my friend Maude Farrell coming to us from the Bay Area today. Very, very pleased to have her joining us. Senior Program Manager uh, at Rivian,
Yep.
and also a longtime endurance athlete, both as an ultra marathoner and now a two-season veteran, shall we say, of the Lifetime Gravel Series.
Yeah.
So stoked to have you here, Maude.
Thanks so much for having me. Very excited to chat with you guys and share a little bit about what's going on in my world right now.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I mean, in terms of, all three of us being pretty committed cyclists, what did you get up to this last weekend in terms of riding or training?
Yeah, I am happy to share that this weekend was not that epic in the scheme of things. And for me, that's a big relief. I spent enough of my time across the year doing really epic things, traveling a ton, riding in places that aren't my home. So I'm pleased to say that this past weekend, I was at home for the first time in 5 weekends. And I met up with some friends in Santa Cruz and we did a big gravel ride on Saturday in the ocean, which was amazing. We had kind of a heat wave in the bay, so it felt like we were back in the throes of July. And then on Sunday, I met up with another friend and we went mountain biking for about 3 or 4 hours over in Skeggs, which is really close to my home and just really fun to stay local. And yeah, it's a nice relief because a lot of the year I'm either training alone or, riding in someone else's backyard or racing. So to have a weekend that felt like, oh, this is where I live and these are my people, it was really nice. Really, really nice.
That's so cool. Yeah,
Awesome.
and Jason, what about you? Like down in SoCal, what was the scene this last weekend?
Rode down in Ventura, or went down to Ventura from Santa Barbara on Saturday, largely actually to ride before a bike fit, or I guess a checkup to a bike fit. Trying to, take a little bit of this off-season time to really get that dialed, although I don't know what my off-season is at this point, now that I'm not racing, but somehow I still segment my year into whatever it is, 8 or 9 months of riding really hard,
Yeah.
and then the few months of resting and building back up to then ride really hard again.
Yeah.
I guess now I'm realizing, Maude, that you and I have way more adjacency than I realized even when we were catching up right before we got on here.
Yeah.
You're in the Bay Area and riding Skeggs, right? I grew up in Menlo Park and rode Kings probably 5 times a week for
Oh,
the first 15 years of my cycling career.
oh my gosh.
Um,
Yeah, it's
and
everything I
then,
ride. That's like my whole area. So,
yeah. And then we're also both 5C alum. Uh, so
oh,
I'm,
Claremont,
I'm,
McKenna.
yeah.
That's
So now,
right. Yeah,
we
yeah.
get to draw the rest of those parallels as well. I don't know if you were
Nice.
riding at all when you were down there, but certainly plenty of time spent on Baldy and GMR.
Yeah,
Uh,
I was gonna say I actually was not a rider in college. My career started kind of later in life, and but I have run many times up Mount Baldy, so I still know the feeling. I'm familiar enough with it to be able to put it in context of riding a bike up it.
yeah,
Yeah, you
absolutely.
also get to do the actual final push to the peak, right? Like the summit, on the ski slopes, in the summertime, which is
Yeah,
legit.
yeah,
That's cool.
yeah. Baldy is it's not a small mountain.
No, not at
No.
all. And right from campus, the fastest I ever got to the lifts was like an hour and 20, and that's all uphill
Yeah,
immediately.
one single climb,
Um,
right? Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I love it. I feel like, my weekend, I'm just gonna like compare and contrast, like I did, I actually had an interesting opportunity. So we had the uh, we had the Nevada City Heart of Gold race actually
Oh, fun. Yeah.
this weekend, and I rode. So I'm in Sacramento, and I rode from Sacramento to Nevada City just for the after party. So I did like base miles to like meet up with people, like, and it was cool because like Lachlan Morton just moved into the area. Like, he's living up in Auburn, and like he actually, was he actually got second in the pro race up there that day, and so it was cool to see him on the podium. And then, then the next day I just did like 95 like flat base miles, like out in the Delta. So like it was like basically like a massive like 170 plus mile weekend for me, like which was just like base. And then it's funny relating that back to the contrast that we always like to make here on Revenue Riders is like the pro versus amateur contrast. And like Jason's like, yeah, like an hour and 20 minutes like up Baldy. And for me, I think there was a time I was on Baldy with the Rafa crew, and it was Tour California, and the person who won the stage that day, and I'm blanking on who they were, but they crushed the top section of Baldy twice as fast as I did. Like literally in half the time that it took me to do it. And I was like, good stuff. Like,
yeah. That's so insane. Yeah. Well, I was just thinking, like, it's funny. You're like, oh, I rode 170 miles this weekend because, I do a lot of workouts on mountain bike or gravel bike, and I'll go out to Skeggs, and Skeggs has a lot of single track as well as some longer, wider fire road style. And I'll look at my device, and I really don't get caught up in numbers anymore, or I've moved away from that, but I'll look down and be like, oh, nice, I did a 2-hour mountain bike workout and I went 13 miles. Like, that's cool. But the difference in the context for those miles and what you're doing, it's just so different. But I do remember, Drew, seeing some of your rides and be like, oh wow, he rode like 100 miles in 3.5 hours. And then I was like, oh yeah, because there was like 1,000 feet of climbing.
Because he's in Sacramento and it's all flat. Context matters is what we found here today.
Yeah,
exactly. And so it's actually funny because, or I'm sure you guys can relate, when you share, someone asks you, especially at work, oh, how far did you ride?
Yeah.
And you share, oh, well, I rode, 50 miles, or I rode 200 miles. And I think most of the time people are like, wow, regardless of how far you ride.
Sure.
But there's so much additional context to that. And I often find myself rambling like, yeah, but there was this, and then there was that. And then like, oh, but there was this other thing that you need to consider. And like, the train is really like this. And that's why it took so long. And everyone's like, they probably don't care. But I always
watch people's eyes glaze over.
Yeah. I'm always like, yeah, but it's important to know the details and that information. But I've started to try to tone it back and be like, okay, I'm just going to answer their question, and they're probably going to be like, wow, cool, regardless of how far I go.
No,
my favorite one is putting a place to, right, whatever the distance is or wherever you rode. Right. It's, okay. Someone in Santa Barbara has context of how far it is to Ventura or to Ojai.
Yeah.
Someone in Redwood City has context of how far it is to get to Los Gatos or wherever you might ride. I don't know that many people have context on how far it is to Nevada City. Sort of out there.
That was the crazy thing. People were like, "You rode to Nevada City," and I was like, "Dude, it's funny because like again, like in cycling, your general frame of reference is like, well, it's only 75 miles and 6,000 feet.
Yeah.
It's like they're like, but you rode to Nevada City, and I'm like, yeah, what? Like, but again, like these are interesting things, and this is why we like to have these conversations, and also as they relate back to the frame of reference of work and career, and how these relative or data of comparison relate to our professional lives. And I
Yeah.
think it's super interesting how these conversations pan out. And I think as a transition point, Maude, I kind of want to speak to how you and I met, which
Yeah.
was in the gravel scene, but initially in cyclocross. And
Yeah.
it was it was the West Coast Points Prestige
Yep.
in Sacramento, which was this weird race format. And it was like you were on Huck at the time, and like
Yep.
it was pre Faffle, and like it was like, and you and Tyler and like Mo, and like there was like the whole crew were there, and it was really
Yeah.
funny because
Oh,
and
that was
then
the
I'm
time.
like here in Sacramento, like just racing my local race. And I thought
That was so fun.
it was super fun. It was such a
Yeah.
weird weekend though too, because there were like drawings for like like front row like positions in the races, and like you could buy like raffle tickets and like move up in the grid, and like it was super
Definitely was not aware of that. And if I have any memory at all, it was like I just kind of slotted myself into the corner or like tried to get to the front, and that was all. That was it. I didn't know that you could buy your way to the front of the grid.
it was super weird. I was like, what is going on here? And like going against like in the men's field, it was like me going against like some of the concept team.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
like,
yeah. Because we
yeah.
met the concept guys that weekend, but that was also um that was a combination. They started men and women together. They were like, all right, there's 100 people who want to race. We'll start them all together. So there were like 100 people starting this cyclocross race, which was actually really sick. And I guess looking back, that was probably a very good experience to have of like a mass start race
Yeah.
and the tactics of really getting ahead before some of the technical stuff. But I was not a very competent technical rider at that time, and I survived those races purely off of sweat and grit, and just was pushing so hard on the pedals. I mean, I think I probably exerted more energy in surviving those races than like any other race, just because I was so bad technically that I had to fight that much harder. But I remember that weekend very fondly, and it was great. And I love cyclocross, and I should probably just race more cyclocross. But yeah, that is where we met.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was just such a trip. And I think that this is the point of like these stories that get told, and the presentation is that of course following you on Instagram as well is such a pleasure, because that's how you do your race reports and
Mhm.
your write-ups, is that at the end of these epic events and these stories that come forward, and the level of detail that you bring to those write-ups, sometimes I'm like, oh, and then she had a flat at like mile 42, and there was like and she couldn't get it fixed, and it was just like completely a mess, and like
Well, Drew, I have to say thanks for reading it, because I was pretty certain only my mom read the whole caption. So now I can say it's Drew and my mom.
yeah,
Um,
like it's all good, just fanboying out over here, so it's
yeah,
all good.
thanks. I
Yeah,
appreciate
you
that.
got it.
Yeah, I mean, I really race reports to me are very much for myself. I mean, we could go and talk for hours about social media and all of the stuff of what that means to racing nowadays, but those race reports are for me a snapshot of what I remember, and hopefully what I will continue to remember, both the good and the bad. And um yeah, I hope that, or what I guess I aim to do, is really share the reality of those things, both from like a hey, this is actually what happened, but also from a yeah, this is how I felt and what was going on inside of me, and what it is about racing that constantly brings me back, even though every single time I get into a race and out of a race, I'm like, that's it, I'm done, I'm over, like I'm quitting. I'm so tired, I'm so over it. And yet I'm still doing it, and I think I don't have an answer why why period.
Right.
I don't really have an answer there, but I am still in it and still going. And every year I say I'm going to retire. And then every year at the end, I'm like, what am I doing next year? And yeah, and actually now is exactly the time where you start to look ahead to 2024. It's, you know, the season doesn't even end. We have one more big race left, and you're already saying, okay, what's coming up? What am I doing? Who am I riding with? You know, what does my training look like? What are my goals? Can be very exhausting. And yeah, it's a lot to constantly be in it, but also planning for the next thing and planning for the next thing. But you have to stay on top of it.
Yeah.
Ways.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
No, I was just going to say, maybe, drawing the parallel to the business world now that I'm, starting to understand that that's exactly how this works, right? Especially when you're part of a go-to-market team, right? The marketing side of things is trying to drum up demand so that the sales side of the team has a pipeline to close for the next quarter, and it sort of continues this cyclical, never-ending, progression forward. Sort of always that's the what's next side of things, and so as we always want to draw the analogy here, that's immediately where my head went. But I guess maybe hearing a little bit about what that 2024 plan, or at least the initial inklings of what that 2024 plan might be for you.
Oh no, you've caught me in an unprepared, unplanned way. So actually, but kind of off of that theme of like it's exhausting, I've actually let myself say that like we'll think about 2024 racing in a couple of weeks. Nice. And I think that I think there's a lot of pressure on athletes, and this is me sharing more just a taste of what it means to be professional, because I don't think that what I do it's not even close to the full throttle life and responsibilities of a real full-time professional athlete. But I like to think I have a lot of conversation. It's, it's a negotiation. It is like you are negotiating a job offer or negotiating a new contract or setting up a plan for, a brand new project. And it's a lot of work. And yeah, in all honesty, with my job and just really wanting to do a good job at Rivian and also finish up the season strong, I've sort of set aside the intensity of planning for 2024. So I have some inklings of things that I'd be curious about, or maybe I'm partially interested in, but a full-fledged Excel document plan I have not gotten around to in 2024. So I know some things that are going to work out, and I know some things are going to happen, but for the most part, in terms of the schedule, I am giving myself a little bit extra time to come around to pick it.
Perfect. Yeah. As it should be. I mean, honestly, two seasons in a row on the Lifetime circuit. I mean, that was an undertaking and a half. I mean, just especially with the success of that series, and also the caliber, especially in the women's field, that is like, it's just like next level.
Yeah. It really
and the
is.
Scope of the logistics for it, right?
Right.
Multiple different types of bikes, different types of events, different types of support needed for different events. Getting to some fairly far-flung places, it all adds up.
Yeah, it really does. I thought that 2022 would make 2023 easier. And maybe in some ways it did, but it's still really, really hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to schedule like flights. I told myself I would be booking things really early and I would get all of my lodging figured out. And I think in some ways that those lessons and stuff happen. But yeah, I think that it never gets fully easy. It never just goes fully automatic plan. Things that you don't know or don't expect do happen. And for me, my partner is a really serious endurance athlete as well. And he was embarking on an incredible effort this past June. He's a runner, not a cyclist. And with running, you do less frequency, but you do have like, it's still a really, really intense logistical challenge. So we were also managing a lot of the, what do you need to do? What do I need to do? Where do you need to be? Where do I need to be? Okay, how do we like structure this, Jenga, this Jenga tower, intelligently and wisely, and also do a good job at the job that pays me to do a good job. Because bikes don't really pay me to do a good job. That's more of like I want to do a good job for myself. So yeah, no, it's the Grand Prix is a very, very serious undertaking, and it is both a very short course, like so short season, as well as like absurdly long. I waver between the, oh my gosh, there's only one more race left, and holy shit, I can't believe it's October and we are still doing this. I have been training since January. So yeah, I definitely go back and forth between those two sides of the spectrum. Just yeah, my mind can't totally process both sides of it. But yeah. It's wild.
But brilliant in that aspect. And I think this is an interesting point. I'm super curious to hear from your perspective, whether on the logistics aspect or in terms of the planning, right? The relationships, I mean, between your vocational role within Rivian as a senior program manager, right, for product development. I mean, you're running roadmaps, you're running, overall timelines. These things obviously inform each other. And I think, would love to hear from you in terms of your experience as your career has built in, for what you get paid for, right? Like, and then of course, how that's, also impacted your ability to, execute as a professional cyclist, right? And the pieces that you've learned and probably a cross-functional aspect there.
Yeah. So my role in program management is actually more in tool and development, or tool and process development. So I help set up systems, processes, literally the instructions of how to do something or how to get something done for my engineering team. So there's an aspect of like timeline and stuff, but I actually think more the shared skill set or shared mindset across those is problem solving. And that, maybe to tie in a neat bow, is a theme that has come up a lot in my career and in my life. Is I really love solving problems. I love thinking of a problem and trying to maximize the outcome of that problem, and not maybe turn into a choice of this or that, but instead be like, what can we do to achieve both of them? And it never works out, but it's always fun to try. And that's, to me, where it gets really, really like satisfying and fun and exciting. Is you might tell me that I can't have this or that together, but that doesn't mean I won't try to do it. And so, with writing and work, that's kind of what also fires me up about both of them. Is not a lot of people have this level of professional career in sport, as well as this level of career in career.
Yeah.
So for me, that, hey, actually most examples that you have to look at, people have had to make a choice. I'm not okay with that. I don't like saying no to things, for better or for worse. But this challenge of not many other people have done this is, for me, like a cool, maybe I can figure this out, and maybe I can figure out a way for me to not have to choose and to be able to do a really excellent job in both. And sometimes excellence is less in one than in the other, and vice versa. But over the course of years, it has felt like I've done a pretty dang good job across both of them. So
Awesome. Dang
Awesome.
good. I love
good.
I would love to hear, in terms of, lessons that you may have learned on the bike that have, informed your professional role,
Yeah.
right? Because I mean, again, like, me fanboying out, like, and just like reading your race reports, like, it's like, yeah, there's like hardcore stuff that goes down. But as we were discussing, it's like, I don't know that much about your professional life. I'm super interested to hear like how that has kind of flowed back into a professional setting.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really interesting and something I have enjoyed thinking through or exploring. And one thing that I constantly come back to is this idea of pacing. And it's sort of something I see about myself, but also more something that I observe in both racing as well as in work. And I really love observing and watching people and then kind of thinking through it for myself. And what I see a lot, especially in maybe people who are new to racing or even people who are experienced in racing and in myself, is an eagerness to go out really hard and go out really fast. And that is motivated by both like hey, I've got energy and I'm excited about this, but I'm also nervous and I want to do this. And like, oh my gosh. And in some ways it's driven because you're not well informed about what's left or what's to come or what the real length of that race is. I mean, everyone's going to talk about Unbound being a great example, and that's true, but it's really across a lot of races. Crusher is a race you really have to pace. Like you can't blow yourself up on that first climb. And yeah, so the idea of pacing comes around in this corporate space when, we have new programs and projects and people are like, oh, I'm going to work for 12 hours today for the next 8 days. And I'm going to like do this thing and it's going to be so intense and people go crazy and they burn out and they get really tired and they're like, I'm so over this, emotionally or their actual physical energy. And I really try to remind people that hey, slowing down, taking a beat, like taking the time to think about things now, maybe stepping away for 15 minutes, an hour to reset and not rushing through it can be the difference between you getting to the end of the race or not. And really thinking about that pacing, and that pacing context is on a scope of days, weeks, but it's also on the scope of years, right? And really thinking about how if you burn yourself out in your career and you suffer your way through it because you think that's how you should approach your career, is to like throw yourself into it, and that this really damaging like hustle mentality and I'm going to work all weekend and I'm never going to take vacation, and when I'm on vacation I'm going to be slacking. It's like, how long are you really going to be able to realize that you've emptied your tank to the point where no nutrition that you put back into your body is going to energize you? And so I really like to think about how pacing is something that is really, really hard to know. And even professionals mess it up and professionals struggle to do it right. But to always remember to apply that. And I try to do that with people that I work with and try to do it in my job, because I think the best thing you can do is maintain that level of energy and maintain that ability to have longevity in whatever you're doing, whether it's a project or what have you. So yeah, it's just constantly asking, is this effort right now something I can sustain for X amount of time? And if not, what do I need to do to change that? What do I need to do to get through it? Do I need to ask for help? Do I need to stop and take a break? Do I need to connect back to myself and eat something? And I do that at work too. I'm like, I haven't eaten all morning. Crap. I need to go get some breakfast, right? It can be that tactile and it can be that literal. So yeah, they're really like pacing and taking care of yourself and really checking in, stepping back. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's real. It's also I think this is something that I feel like people learned much more during the pandemic. Even though, you also saw the opposite, right? I mean, it's because people over rotated into like, well, I can't go anywhere. I can't do anything. I don't have a social life. Like, it's funny because people who were involved in bikes, like we had that more than so many people, right? Because
Yeah.
we were like, our primary venue was like outside, and I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. And coffee shops didn't shut down either. So it was like, well, at least I've got bikes and coffee.
Yeah.
So like,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. It's so true. And you have the tolerance to stay outside for 5 to 8 hours.
right.
And I
Yeah.
don't think I think we forget that is like a lot of people don't know what it means to just stay outside for 5 to 8 hours. And you're
Sure.
just outside and you got to bring your layers and you have to bring your snacks and you need to know where to get water and you need to know how to take care of yourself. But that also, yeah, it did. In COVID, we were well suited to a life of you can only spend time outside. And we're like, okay, we can manage that. We can handle that.
Sounds good to me, but
I think more generally, it's not just right. You can only spend time outside, but it's a life of endurance, right? You know, like, can you do this one thing and be okay with, right? I guess, you know, at its very core, like just spending time with yourself,
Yeah.
right? And I think from riding a bike, we all get, or at least something I've certainly gotten, is the ability to spend time with myself and either listen to the voices in my head, listen to the silence in my head. You know, sort of just be there and sit with it and be okay when there's a lot going on internally or nothing going on internally, and, you know, sort of trying to figure out what the balance is between the two and being okay with just, all right, this is what's happening. This is how it's happening. And we're going to maintain whatever the level of function and consistency that has to happen to keep moving forward.
Yeah. Like you said something that sparked for me, like the ability to really talk to yourself and the ability to talk yourself through something. And at work too, and I'm not saying, I feel like I'm constantly comparing myself against other people, but it's really, again, this observation of, wow, something that maybe, or that I think sports has given me is that capacity to talk myself through stuff, and especially talk myself through really challenging things and things that are really frustrating and things that are not planned. This was never the plan. I do not like that this is happening, but it is what's happening. So we need to get through it. And those road bumps. And I definitely see in work sometimes I do this and my colleagues will do it where they get really frustrated and frazzled and like really, and that doesn't always serve that end goal. And so the ability to really talk yourself through it and problem solve and say, okay, this wasn't the plan, and it's not a problem, and it's okay, and we don't need to panic about it. We need to think about how we get through it now. We need to problem solve. And I really try to bring that headspace to challenges that we don't foresee, and vice versa. Hopefully in riding, use that problem solving to say, okay, this isn't the end of the race. This isn't the end of, you know, being competitive in this race. I need to reevaluate what's going on. What do I need to change? How do we need to get through it? And I'm not perfect at it. There are moments that I completely lose my mind. There are times at work that I'm like, I need to vent now. And I think those are healthy as well. But yeah, that ability to talk to yourself and rationalize with yourself or just move through those things. Spending 5 hours on a bike, whether you're alone or with friends, it's good practice.
100%.
Absolutely. And I mean, right, you know, thinking about it in terms of, you know, not only do you learn to talk to yourself, not only do you really, you know, sometimes you are going to lose it. You're going to have to vent. You're going to explode a little bit. But if that happens on the bike, unless you're calling an Uber, you still got to ride yourself home. Right. So, you know, there is some, even there's some ingrained learning in that, you know, well, okay, fine. I'm going to explode. This is going to be crazy for a little bit. I'm going to be really frustrated. This isn't the plan. This isn't what I wanted.
Yeah.
But guess what? It has to get done anyways. So, you know, recoup, reorganize, and keep charging forward.
Yeah, it's definitely been on plenty of projects for that.
Yeah, and it's really funny, like you like brought up the Uber point, because I always have that in like doing long rides on the road. I always keep that in the back of my mind, but then I think about, like, you know, I actually one, you know, morning in Ukiah, right? Like as we like get ready for Low Gap, and Maude and I saw each other there, like, you know, I was on the ride of my life at Low Gap 2 years ago, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna be like top 20 in like, basically like the amateur men's field. Like, this is amazing. And then in a split second, a twig, literally a 3 millimeter twig jumped into my rear jockey wheel, and my entire rear mech just ripped off the back of my bike.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, cool. And I was within 10 miles of the finish. And it was like, cool, everything had been perfect. And then that happened. And it was like, cool, you just have to figure out how to finish the race or get back to the finish line.
Yeah.
And it took me 3 hours to finish the last 10 miles of that race.
Oh my gosh.
Because I was hike-a-biking, or like I broke my chain and turned my bike into like a single speed, and like it just and ruined my rear cassette. It like broke, and like, so
I had no idea.
it's just like, it's hilarious because these are the things that you're like, all right, well, I have to get it done. Can't call an Uber when you're on a fire road on the backside of the mountain at low gap. Like, you're like, okay, cool. I'm gonna get this done.
Yep.
But no, it's real, and I think Maude, on that point of pivoting or learning, right? Interested to hear from you, because you've also pivoted as a professional athlete, right? Like, you've gone from being a runner to being a cyclist, and there are a number of professional athletes who make that pivot.
Yeah.
But also interested to hear like that aspect of initial discovery, and this is something that I love helping people with, and I normally like am promoting as a Rafa ride leader, and also like just on, like just getting people into cycling at all, right, is like something I do. But then I'm super interested to hear from your perspective, like that sort of point of initial learning or exposure or ramping, and how you kind of walk yourself through that experience.
Yeah. So yeah, I was a ultra marathon runner. I had always been a runner. I started running when I was 15 in high school. And I was all right. I remember I really liked the 400 meter, and my coach, who was an amazing person, so don't take this the wrong way, like very, very supportive. I remember him looking at me and going, you're just never going to be that fast in the context of the 400 meter. Cause I thought 400 meter, he was like, you should be running the mile. And I was like, heck no, I'm not running the mile. That's way too long. And now of course I'm like, I would do anything to be a miler. My fiance turned to me a couple months ago because he was training to run around 175 miles. I was training for Unbound, and he's like, after this, do you think that we should just train to be sprinters? We should just train for the mile. Which is not to diminish the effort that it takes to train for a fast mile, but in my head, I'm like, the amount of hours we would have would be great. But I digress. So yeah, I was a runner, and spent a lot of time on trails and got really into technical trail mountain running, did that, but running is really hard on your body. I got injured. And honestly, bikes have always been in my life. I used to ride around on bikes in my family's very remote, property, and we would ride bikes down to the farm, and we'd always be on bikes. But never in a, athletic training way, but I was a bike commuter when I moved to San Francisco, and that was just clearly the best way to get around the town. And I, of course, had no idea that I was supposed to put air in my tires, or like lube my chain, or like, I don't know, adjust my brakes. So I just rode around on this commuter that I thought was really expensive and, a huge investment. And look back, I'm like, wow, if only I could pay that much for a bike again. So, context changes, but yeah, so bikes had always been around me, and I knew how to pedal, but they weren't a device I used for fitness. And then I got really injured when I was training for the Barkley Marathons in 2017. I got really bad hip flexor tendonitis. And yeah, it was odd. I couldn't walk upstairs and couldn't lift my legs, but I could pedal a bike. It was so bizarre. And so I said, well, I know Marin is amazing. I've run around in those, on those trails and in that area. I should get a bike that I can go on the trails still and kind of do what I did as a runner. And I bought a cyclocross bike at a fire sale in a parking lot when I was supposed to be shopping for a bridesmaid's dress. And I was like, I'd rather do this. I'd rather shop for bikes. So I bought a bike, and my partner at the time was also really into bikes. So, he was really supportive and helped, I don't know, give me tips, and we'd go out together. And I still very much saw it as just a means to stay healthy and fit until I could run again. And that was true for 2018, 2019. Or I guess 2017, 2018. And then 2019, I remember him turning to me and being like, I think you're really good. It's like, I think that like there's something going on here that you should really seriously consider. And bikes were also a really important social piece. So that the community of bikes and people that I found, for whatever reason, was really impactful, more so than I had found in running. And I love people. I love being around people. I'm very much a people person. I love meeting friends. I love spending time with friends. I love talking. So yeah, it just was a natural fit, and I started riding a lot. And then when 2020 hit and, a lot of people bought bikes, I just went full throttle and used it to train, and had a lot of low hanging fruit in terms of fitness and skill, and got really fast, really good, really fast, also really fast, really fast. And and in 2021, I think that I've always been a competitor. I've always been like, okay, you train and you do these things, and then you bring that somewhere, and you do something with it. And whether that's racing, or whether that's doing something at work and turning it into something, like I wanted to put it to something. And so I started racing, and we're 3 years in now.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
yeah. I think that's the long story.
No, it's great. It's great. I love it. So that's really, it's fascinating from my perspective too, because of course that like initial engagement around bikes and cyclocross, and that was like the beginning of your time as like actually a serious cyclist.
Yeah.
So
That group of
really cool.
women that we met,
Yeah.
that was really a moment that clicked for me, because those were people who were as passionate about it, who were as committed to the advancement of their skills, the advancement of their fitness, and frankly, who were at the same level, that we could keep up with. And we were all wanting to be in it, to be competitive and to be absolutely badass about it. And, we all looked at each other. I remember sitting around with like Alice and Emily and Mo, and we were all like, yeah, what do we want out of being on a team together? And we all agreed that we wanted to show up, and it wasn't necessarily about winning, but we wanted to make sure that everyone else around there was like, oh shit, I have to bring my A game. If these women are here racing, like we better show up, because that competitiveness felt like a way for me to find my best self. And it seemed like that, that the other three agreed as well. So that group was actually a big, big piece of why cycling felt so fun and felt so great, was really on them. And I think that's true, women in the career space too. Like I love when I get on a call or in a meeting that we're figuring something out, and I'm like, there's not a single guy here. Like, this is rad. And we're just out there solving it together. And I find that really invigorating. And I want to it makes me want to be a better, teammate. It makes me want to be a better version of myself to really help push everyone else to be amazing as well. So yeah, that group that was the start of it all. You really saw it, Drew. You've been there for like a long a long stretch of it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
No, it's so cool. And then, of course, I think you're right. Like the aspect of being in Northern California or just California overall. I mean, there's so much riding here, and I think that point with you living at the base of Tam is such an interesting aspect because, we all have these maybe specialties that we develop based on you know our physiology, and then also like our ability to access particular types of terrain,
Yeah.
and also our general like willingness to travel far and wide to kind of access additional venues. And I think
Yeah.
what's fascinating with that is you say like, yeah, like the level of effort is not necessarily related to how far I ride, but the context or the composition
Yeah.
of what you ride. And I think that also has a lot to do with community.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, who do you have access to, and what do you have as an example? And I think that setting that point of representation like is absolutely like I am aware of it, and I feel like that evolution just in terms of the FAFL ladies, right? Like, even though that's redundant, it's Department of Redundancy Department. But like, FAFL ladies, like, no, and that the progression of also just the sport. And I think we hit a bump on that this last week with Gravel Worlds, like not necessarily being televised, like and it's kind of like, okay, yeah, like these are also points of reality because so many people just in our sport overall, like people still think the Tour de France is the only cycling event in the entire year.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Well,
you're
Definitely.
I
like,
mean, you can even go back to looking at the fact that Sepp won the Vuelta, and I'm guessing most Americans couldn't tell you that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That's true.
yeah, and it's these are points of like just the exposure, and part of why Jason and I are doing this, because we're like, yeah, we sit here, we talk about our sport, or we talk about what we're into with people, and you shared a similar story, Maude, where it's like, hey, we do this thing, and people are like, you're like a total freak, like
Yeah.
alien, like you're like, oh well, no, I'm your coworker, and that's what I do on the weekend, or
Yeah.
like that's what I do
yeah.
in my
Yeah.
evenings. Like, it's fine,
Yeah.
like just something to get the word out about it. And I think that
Yeah.
that aspect that aspect is really interesting in terms of it informing our approach to life, because it is such an undertaking to kind of be focused on the sport, but also it's such an undertaking for anybody to be focused in their career, to be focused in their family, in their life overall. And
Mhm.
I think what I would say, reinforce is that these are all the same relative undertakings, right?
Yeah.
It's a point
Yeah.
of, and we talked about this with Andrew Vance as well, is like just the awareness of being the best version of yourself and bringing yourself to that undertaking. And
Yeah.
would love to hear more from you in terms of just the aspect, because in our interaction, I've always found you to be incredibly gregarious, like you said, like you love people, you love like the hangout aspect of the community. And I'm interested to hear your thoughts on, ways that we can improve the community, either, and also accessibility to our sport in general, because I think that's one thing that
Mhm.
I run into, is that people think it's only for the fast people, or only like, if you can afford a certain kind of bike. And I've told people like, no, like you could go get like a $600 bike like off of Craigslist that'll probably get you through the first couple of years, or like,
Yeah.
build a bike at the bike kitchen for like $150 and just go ride
Yeah.
that until you're happy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Oh man, I'm not the right person to ask. I think there's so many amazing organizations that are doing real work to make bikes accessible and actually really bring more people into them. And I would look to them for expertise and knowledge, because I will not pretend for a second that I've done any significant amount of work. But I guess what I'd like to say, maybe to my credit, is I'm really glad and honored that that's your impression of me, because I think that bikes can be really serious. I think that racing can be really serious. I think that people who wear tight clothes and have really expensive gear can be really intimidating. There's literally nothing to hide when you're in a cycling kit, which is ridiculous. And so it is really intimidating. And so I guess I would hope that if I'm at an event or wherever, that I can help someone feel less intimidated by what there is. And then also give them a little nudge and be like, I bet you're better than you think you are. And that's especially true with women. And I see this all the time, where I don't think that racing is the end all be all and that everyone needs to end up and be a racer. But I think that people, especially people who are not, the typical male example in cycling, are much faster to diminish their potential. And so I like to talk to women and kind of antagonize them to consider, or maybe play around and maybe act a little bit like they could do more, they could be more, they can accomplish it, because I really believe that they can. And so, I'll go on group rides or lead rides, and someone will be like, oh, that's not me, or I can't do that. I'm like, are you sure? Why not try? You should think about it. I bet you can. And like, try to kind of like nudge them. And I find that really, really satisfying, because yeah, like you said, it's really aspirational to be the best version of yourself. And I think, going back to the themes of like endurance and pacing and even just training, every day is not your best day. In fact, it's rarely your best day every day. But as you do that, every little incremental day you spend training, the idea is that you are progressing towards that. And sometimes you go backwards, and that's part of it as well. And so I think that sport has definitely taught me that I am not going to be the best version of myself every day. And that's not the goal. The goal isn't that, every day show up and I'm the smartest person in the room, or that I'm the best sister in the world, or that I'm, the perfect partner. The effort you put in to get there and build towards that's the gold, right? That's the effort. And so I try to really put that in context for people who do enter the sport. Like, yeah, you're not fast. You're not as fast as I am, or you're not as fast as that person is today. Who cares? Like, did you show up and try your hardest? Did you give it your best? Did you give it what you wanted, even if that's a mediocre effort? And if you did, great, show up and do it again tomorrow. Show up and do it again tomorrow. And really encouraging people to say it doesn't need to be the best every day. It needs to be every day, regardless of what that looks like. And yeah, I honestly forget now where I was going with that, but to share, what it means to make cycling more accessible is, I hope that people can really give themselves that grace to be like, today, my best is I'm going to go spin in the park for 30 minutes. And maybe tomorrow I'm going to go ride up Tam 5 times and, give it this 12-hour effort. And you can be like, heck yeah, to both of those things. And it doesn't need to look one way or another. It just needs to be what you can give that day.
yeah, and give to yourself.
Yeah, definitely.
That's awesome.
But yeah, bikes are hard. I mean, Accessibility is a really, really tough nut to crack, especially when stuff is really expensive, like full stop.
Yeah.
And ironically, I'm a professional athlete and I have sponsorships, but I also work because I know it's expensive. And I work because I wanted the financial support to be able to do the things that I want to do. But that's also a trap. And I know
Yeah.
it's a trap. So, and I know it's not something that everyone has the privilege to pursue or to have. And so I don't know. I don't have an answer, but I do watch myself in that same system and be like, oh, yeah, I work and I have this career because the money I earn is something that I can spend on the thing that I want. And that makes it accessible to me. But how do we change that for everyone? Oof, that's like, I don't know. I really don't know.
That's the whole, engine, and also like the aspect that, we're all trying to solve, that goes all the way to like the development level, that goes all the way down to, the amateur club level, just finding local sponsors, right? I mean, having
Yeah.
run a team myself, it's always, how exactly do you offset the cost of this very engaged undertaking, and also like make sure that it also stays fun for the people who it's like, it's really their showing up and their enjoyment of the sport is, and their effort is really very akin to just a general volunteer effort if you're going to be
Yeah.
on a team, because otherwise, everybody can just be like a full-blown privateer, which is like, it's like, well, and yeah, I mean, sometimes you see it going that way, and it's because it kind of scales better for the particular aspect of the sport. But
Yeah.
the this conversation can kind of like go down a completely different direction and become completely hackneyed as well. You're like, oh yeah, we've heard it. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I know.
uh, Maude, any particular, just, I always partners that you have, or teammates, sponsors, etc., that like have just really been there for you, like, and just have really helped to like, shape your overall trajectory.
Yeah.
If you want to call anybody out, would love to
Oh
give
my
you that space.
gosh. No, you don't want to hear me do that because it would last for hours. But no, I think that is really important. And I am very, very fortunate to have some really amazing people on my team. And it really is a team. My fiance, Steven, is at the pointy end of all of it. He sees every single highest high and every single lowest low. And I'll tell you that the low lows are probably more common than the high highs. And my family is really great. But yeah, in terms of friendship, everyone who goes riding with me, and especially the ones who I can text and say, hey, let's go for a ride, but also here are the parameters of my ride. We can't stop that much and it needs to be this long, and maybe every once in a while I'm going to have to do a sprint, so do you still want to come? And some of my friends are like, heck yeah, what's your workout? I'll do it with you. Or yeah, no problem. Like catch you, just like we ride backwards. And, having, I think, having the acceptance of people around me to do that and to have them maybe, give me a little bit of a prod or kind of make fun of me a little bit just to keep me humble is nice, but it means a lot to be able to have that kind of community who can really respect that and is, open to it. But yeah, I ride, so in gravel, I ride for Pivot Cycles, which is an awesome brand. They're not a mega huge brand like some of the other names, but they are really basically like a family. They're really small and run out of Arizona. And I really am honored to ride for them as like a nice compliment to their really intense downhill space. So I like to pretend I'm teammates with these people who are so much more competent at bikes than I am. And yeah, I think one of the more exciting things that has happened is Mall Studios, which is a cycling kit brand. They opened up a shop in San Francisco. And I think this is very similar probably to your experience with Rafa, but having that physical location, I think, has been just a huge community builder and becomes really a column or a support structure for community. And it's been really fun to have that space and have a meeting point and to be able to share that with so many people. So it's been a really amazing experience this year, is having that centerpiece for starting rides and ending rides and just engaging with others and having events. And they've been a really amazing company, and also very much like a family feeling, very small, but pretty mighty. So yeah, I'm really fortunate. I also genuinely ride for people who I love and adore, and they are brands that I've looked up to and admire. And I'm fortunate to be able to choose them, and they chose me. And it feels very special to be like, okay, we're in this for reasons of like, I love you, not just because whatever, I have to be here, I need to survive in this sport. So I feel really, really fortunate to have brands that are to me the best, and I get to work with them. So yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Super cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I will say, like, just it's been such a, just a great opportunity to sit down with you and actually have this more detailed conversation, than of course, like, seeing each other at like cycling events and being like, yo, like, like you're right there. Like,
The 10-second flyby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like, of course, like the many times that I've cheered for you on a podium. But
you are very loud, and I really appreciate it. And it's been a while since I've been on a podium, but I will say I can definitely verify that is true.
It's like it's something about. I feel like my tendency, like as a cycling fan and also like a participant in the sport, is almost as like a party, like frat boy alumnus. It's like sort of just like yelling overly enthusiastically about like whatever occurs, so that's like,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Like, and now we'll do like the 5-year-old crit wins. You're like, yeah, let's do it.
my god kids actually have been thoroughly embarrassed by,
oh my gosh.
and my goddaughter, the time that she actually won like second for the season in like the under 10-year-old like
Yeah.
CX,
Yeah.
she was just like, Drew, will you please stop? But,
you're embarrassing me.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna like share, because we said this before we started recording, but yeah, that friendliness and that relationship, it's funny, right? Because I don't know you, and I don't know that much about you, but I feel like I know you in a way that a lot of other people can't understand, and it's very difficult to explain. And that knowing each other by saying like, I know you're about to go ride for 4 hours and I'm about to ride for 4 hours, and we're not going to talk, but we now share this understanding of ourselves and situations that we put ourselves into in a way that other people may never understand. And I really appreciate that about cycling, is there's a sort of intimacy and relationship that you build with people that is so different than anything else in the world. And that common understanding, or that common seeking out of those experiences is strange, but I find that often the hardest thing to communicate in work to people is what that really means. Luckily, my manager is really into bikes, and he deserves a huge thank you, because he has always been really respectful and really supportive of this endeavor of mine, and it has made it a lot easier emotionally to divide my attention and my energy. And I think he gets that, and it has made our working relationship so strong, because there's a level of just understanding of, you get it and I get it, and we don't have to always talk about it, but we have this common understanding of the world and experience. So yeah, it's actually been a huge boon to my career, is being able to connect with that person, and then that flows into a lot of other relationships, and a level of trust, and a level of honesty that is otherwise really difficult to build, and can be something that stunts a career or it can help accelerate a career. And I think I've been really fortunate that it's been the latter. So
Brilliant. Love it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is something where I think this is a lot of how Drew and I ended up starting this whole thing was, that understanding that 4 hours spent in silence riding next to someone tells you a lot more about, a year's worth of conversations with them off the bike often can. And, how we've been able to sort of find that and how that maps, to stuff off the bike, with work and with everything else that someone might do with their day-to-day life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Totally.
And on that note, I am going to say thank you so much, Maude. I really appreciate it. Like, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks to all the managers out there who understand, like, when somebody's like, "Yo, I gotta go train," because
Yeah.
I will speak to it. My CEO. Derek Hitchman is a mountain biker. My COO is a triathlete, and that's made things a lot better for me. Like at SCS
Yeah.
Cloud, and then of course Jason, CEO, is an ex-Cat 2 cyclist
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
over at Live Data Technologies. So shout
Yeah.
out to those crew as well, just
Yeah.
as our unofficial sponsors.
And a shout out too, like if maybe I'll give some advice if anyone unsolicited. It's like I've also really realized that the more open I am in my work environment about what is important to me and what I'm going to prioritize and how I'm going to fit this in with my life, the more that others have come forward and been like, hey, I have this thing and I have this thing that I do outside of work that's really important to me. And you've really helped me feel more comfortable in prioritizing that and making sure that work doesn't consume it. And so I think it's really important. And what I really try to do in work is say like, hey, tell me what's important to you because this is important to me and I want you to value it. But having that mutual respect makes it easier. So, really encouraging people like if cycling is important to you, share that and be open with it and be honest with it because it also empowers you to make time for it. And people respect it. And I think it also gives them the power to say, hey, what's important to me? What am I going to choose to do instead of, feeling like I need to grind at this work for forever. So, shout out to all the managers and a reminder that those things make you more efficient and just a happier person to be around in the day-to-day job. So,
right. Yeah. The balance is real.
Yeah.
Balance is real, and finding passion outside of the four walls or virtual four walls of an office, can really help, ground all the work that you do when you're focused.
Totally agree.
So.
Yeah, totally agree with that.
Maude, thank you so much again.
Thanks for having me, guys. This was super fun. Really excited for your whole project. This is a really great idea. So thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, you got it.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you very much to all of our listeners. Thank you, Jason, as always, my friend, for co-hosting and for just crushing it. Very cool. And
now we're all going to have to find a time to go ride since that's how
right.
Right. And
I was like,
Maude and I have to pick whether we're doing it on Kings or on Baldy.
Yeah. I'll be in SoCal soon. So maybe a nice climb up Baldy will be refreshing.
Perfect.
Legit. Super cool. Awesome, team. Thanks so much. Thanks so much to our listeners and Revenue Riders. Out.